Hey, before I get started, I just want to check in online. Myron, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can.
Very good. And Stacy, I see you there. And then for Stacy and caller one, just for awareness, we do have a closed session on the committee of the whole tonight. So we'll have some discussion in open, and then we'll have some in closed, and then we'll adjourn. So once we go into closed, we'll just adjourn this meeting, and then we'll have the council meeting start at 7.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, I think it's 6:01, so why don't we go ahead and call the meeting to order. Thank you guys for coming. I try not to have committee of the wholes more than we need to, because you guys are already in meetings plenty of time. But we wanted to make sure that we could spend a little bit of time briefing you all on the housing projects we have in the pipe. Mason is going to share some info, Brian's going to share some info. We're happy to answer any questions that you can, that we can. As is the nature with development, the list that you have in your packet is fairly de-identified, and that's intentional. You know, we work with a lot of projects who are interested in announcing their projects when they're ready to announce their projects. But we want to be able to answer as many of your questions as we can. So we'll do that in open, and then we have intention to go into closed session so that we can talk more specifically about some of the negotiating strategies for the developments that are probably coming the closest. We just want to make sure that we're on par with the expectations of the council so that we're not getting too far down any one road and then have issues that we could have heeded at the beginning of the process. So that's our plan for this evening. I'm going to invite Mason up because Mason's going to kick us off. We're just talking about housing, and at the end of this discussion, I would be interested to hear from you all if you have a similar interest in a presentation about non-housing developments. Mason has this really great development tracker. He keeps track of all the projects that we work on, the ones that we win, the ones that we don't, the ones that take years, the ones that come and go every quarter. So if there's interest from you all in that, we can provide something similar at a future date for that topic. But this conversation tonight will just stick to just housing. So, sound like a plan? All right. And we do have Alder Moldenhauer online. Mr. Smith, I knew would not be able to make it this evening. He told me yesterday, and perhaps Mr. Blanky will join us. So.
Sounds good. Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate the opportunity to be here in front of all of you this evening. I think this is a good time to brief all of you on some of the potential housing developments we have in the city of Watertown. In front of you, I passed out it's kind of a redacted list of potential developments that are coming to the city. Once we get into closed session, I'll be able to share a little bit more specific information on all of those potential projects with you. One thing I want to get out of the way right away is you're going to look at that sheet and see, wow, we've got a lot of housing potentially coming. This is great. It's important to realize that right now these are all proposals. For the most part, we don't have signed development agreements with most of these. Some of them aren't going to happen. It's a very challenging time right now, and I went over that in the memo that you all received in your packet. Interest rates are high. Construction costs have stabilized somewhat, but they are still high. One example, we just had a meeting this morning where we had a potential multifamily development. We think it's still going to move forward eventually, but we've been told the developer is hitting pause for right now, just because even with potential heavy TIF assistance that they're asking for, the project just is not penciling out right now. With interest rates right now, it's just not making sense. So they're hitting pause. Hopefully it'll come back online at some point in the next 6 to 12 months, but who can say that for sure right now? What I'm trying to show too on this sheet, and Brian Zerbis helped me a lot on creating that spreadsheet in front of you, there's a lot of steps that we have to go through before a shovel gets in the ground. It's not just about me or Emily having one phone conversation with a developer and then they're breaking ground a few months from now. We have many meetings, there's a lot of effort. We have to look at issues like future land use. We have to consider zoning changes. We have to consider potential TIF requests. One thing we'll talk about more in closed session is there's going to be some heavy TIF asks coming in front of you. The days where it's just maybe a 60 to 70% TIF ask are unfortunately gone for the time being. We're going to be talking about much heavier TIF. And that's going to be something that the Common Council is going to have to consider. Is this something we're comfortable with? But we need to have these conversations now, because I don't want to get to the point where we're about to sign a development agreement and then we find out that the policymakers aren't interested. You know, I know nobody here wants their time wasted. I certainly don't want my time wasted. I will share with you all, I've been extremely busy, especially since the start of the year. We are getting inquiries left and right, not just from developers, but from engineers. Today, I had a contact with an architectural firm with a really exciting project they're working on, and they are interested in talking about Watertown. So these things are happening. So I want to make sure that everybody's using their time productively. I want to make sure that we're efficiently using city time, city resources. As I mentioned in the memo, you know, our need is across the board. And I know you guys have had presentations from Thrive and the Greater Watertown Community Health Foundation about our full need for housing. It's not about single family versus multifamily. It's not about owner occupied versus rental. Our needs across the board. I referenced some statistics in there. We do have the potential to get better data that would be Watertown specific if that's something the council is interested in. I just want to reiterate, none of this is easy. It takes a lot of work. And a lot of people that maybe wouldn't have looked at Watertown even just a couple of years ago, they're looking at the city of Watertown today. They want to look at doing projects here, and that's really exciting. It's not because of me or anything I did, even though I can say I am working really hard trying to get things moving. It's because of all the work that happened over the last 10 years. So that's something to be proud of. So yeah, in conclusion, just to summarize some of the first takeaways on the handout, we've got a mix of potential projects coming up. I believe there's 3 proposed single-family developments on there. There's 5 proposed apartment complex developments. One of those might not be happening. We also have at least 6 potential duplex condo or TBD developments that are still in flux. So I hope that's kind of a succinct summary of why we're here this evening. And if any of you have any initial questions right now, without getting into too much specifics in development, you know, proposal specifics, I'd be happy to take those right now.
I have a question, Emily.
Sure.
My question would be, how are the builders looking at duplexes? Are they looking at duplexes or just multifamily? I mean, the duplexes have been fairly popular in the past. Mm-hmm. So I'm just wondering if that maybe should be looking more at duplexes.
That's a great question, Alderman Moldenhauer, and that's an important point. We'll get into specifics more later, but some of those multifamily developments aren't just apartment buildings. Some of them do include a mix of like duplexes or twin home products. One of them that I think we can kind of talk about openly, the project that the Health Foundation is working on in their former Bethesda property. That will include, it's proposed not only to include apartment buildings, but also some twin homes that would be done by a local company. So yes, they are definitely looking at those.
Yep.
How do we compare to adjoining communities and their experience over the last 10 years?
It's similar. I think if you look at most of Jefferson County and Dodge County, it's been, you know, ever since, you know, after the Great Recession, building kind of started to dip, and it's been tough. And like I mentioned in the memo, you know, you can look west to Dane County, you can look east to Waukesha County, and developers are just simply able to get a much quicker ROI in those higher growth areas. So our need hasn't changed. I mean, I think that story's been the same for 8 to 10 years now. But yeah, other neighboring communities are seeing similar challenges in getting development going, but they have similar need.
I'll just add, I've shared, I meet with Jefferson County leaders, I think monthly. The county administrator brings us together, and they're rejoicing over one project. we have 11. So not all 11 are going to come to pass. But I can tell you, like, we were in a meeting earlier today with a group of developers, 2 of which are outside consultants, and, I said, we have 11 different projects. You're involved in 3 of those, because a couple we have phased appropriately. But they were still like, wow, I mean, that's great. So I think what Mason said early on, the investment we made in ourselves, in our downtown, in our infrastructure, those investments have garnered the attention that we were hoping that they would. And we get, as Mason said, the amount of inquiries we're receiving. I don't want to make you talk badly about Fort Atkinson, but Fort Atkinson hasn't had a housing project in,
Not a new apartment building built in 20 years.
so I think we're a little bit,
Yeah, and
I like Fort Atkinson a whole lot, so I'm not talking bad about them. But I mean, I think
like
to
it
answer your
too.
question both ways, I think we're all in a similar boat, but I think we are really pushing. And a lot of that's having one person that we send all these people to.
So how do you close those deals?
We're going to talk about that in closed.
Okay,
Yeah, we got to get negotiation strategy from you guys, so.
thanks.
Yeah, I'll, since you mentioned Fort Atkinson, and we were talking about difficulties, Fort Atkinson has 75 acres of city-owned land they bought a few years ago. They had a master development agreement signed with a major company, and that development agreement just lapsed because they could not get the financials to work out, and that's even in another community with a critical identified need. So it's very tough to make these things come together.
Mason will stick around.
Yep.
So he's not headed anywhere yet. Why don't we have Brian come up? So I wanted, one of the things on the chart that you guys have in your packet is about future land use and current zoning. Those things aren't there on accident. After the discussion that we had at a recent meeting, I want to make sure that we are all on the same page about what those things are, what they mean, what your comfortability is. Because as you'll see in the needed work column, many of these projects will require a very similar action. And so I asked Brian if he would just provide some information to make sure we're all operating from the same knowledge point about future land use and current zoning. And then I feel like I just need to disclaimer it. He provides this insight, and then nearly every time we meet about any project, I'm like, so which one again? Because they're complex topics that, unless you do them every single day like Brian does, can use a little refresher sometimes. So, what would you like to share with us?
All right, well, I was asked to give a brief refresher on exactly what future land use and the comprehensive plan and zoning are and how they work together. Future land use designation within the comp plan generally designates the preferred location of land uses within the city, for example, industrial, commercial, residential. The comp plan is adopted by the city to serve as a policy guide on the development of the community. In contrast, zoning consists of specific regulations and standards that development needs to follow to be built, such as setbacks, lot sizes, landscaping, lighting, all that kind of stuff. Multiple zoning districts can be consistent with any particular future land use category. For example, if in the comp plan, if the area is designated for mixed industrial future land use, that could be consistent with planned industrial, general industrial, or heavy industrial zoning, depending on the nature of the proposal that's before the city. Future land use guides and defines the growth patterns for the city, and zoning implements the plan. When a future land use designation is no longer relevant due to changes in land use preferences or development patterns, an amendment to the comprehensive plan future land use designation is required. Likewise, if the underlying zoning is not compatible with the new future land use designation, an amendment to the zoning would also be required. Future land use and zoning need to be consistent with one another, make everything work the way it's supposed to. You did, as it was mentioned, you did get a handout that kind of expands on this a little bit and has a little graphic that attempts to show the how all this works. With that, I will see if anyone has any questions on any of this, or we can ask them later too if they come up.
Ms. Davis?
Could you review the process that's involved in developing and getting a comprehensive plan approved? What are the steps that are initially taken? I guess, was it 10 years ago or more?
2019.
2019, yeah, it was the last time it was adopted. Basically, the city usually hires a consultant to do that because it's a pretty big undertaking. They go through a process where there's a lot of meetings, gathering public input, The different elements of the comprehensive plan are written and approved. There's a public participation plan that's required under state law, and ultimately it gets approved by the city. And becomes
Public
the-
hearing, right? Is there a public hearing in
Yeah,
there?
there's public
Yeah.
hearings, yeah, I just
Yep.
kind of
Yeah.
given the high overview there.
Yeah, so we had in 2009, we had done a comp plan and, you know, in a variety of ways over time, I don't know that we used it as much. And so then when 2019 came around and we were gonna, it's a sizable amount of money. It's like $40,000 or $50,000 to update these plans. You know, we talked about updating them with intentionality, you know, like really stepping through the process and getting input and talking about specific parcels and kind of in a way doing your best to forecast what could be somewhere, what could change. At the same time as we undertook that process, we knew as we were going through the approval process that we had areas of our zoning that were a little wonky. Brian presented those during his budget request to have some, we have areas that are unknown zoning. So you can't make all the adjustments that you'd want to make during a comp plan process. But we tried to make a lot that we knew could potentially come to pass in the future. But we'll still have some zoning changes. We have a couple of projects that have come up with unknown zoning or zone.
Multiple zoning.
Multiple
where
is the
there's
other one.
Multiple different
Yeah.
districts, the records aren't clear. And then there's a few that are conditionally zoned, which is an interesting anomaly in itself.
Yeah.
So,
Any other questions? Yeah.
So we spent a lot of time with the planning consultant doing the comprehensive plan. What is their role today on a day-to-day basis? Do they have a role?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you can answer. I can
Well,
add.
they don't necessarily have a day-to-day basis. They're mainly on a project-specific basis. So if we have something that needs to be clarified, or we need some additional information on, or an interpretation, we'll consult them and something like that. But they don't. I understand that in the past they used to have a planner come from Vanderwall to meetings like this. That type of thing does not occur anymore. That's more handled by, I guess, me and Mason to some degree. That's
In Vanderwall.
and Vanderwall. Well,
So we just,
yeah.
we have a project, a multifamily housing project that had a lot of questions on interpreting code. Our zoning code came from Vanderwall. Vanderwall, like any other, consultant, is going to have essentially a template of different ordinances that people adopt. We adopted their sign code, we adopt their zoning code. So when we have questions about how to interpret something, which we have with a project right now, we just met with them last week or earlier this week and said, what was the intention? How would you interpret this? What adjustments can we make? What do we need to make in order to make this not be an issue in the future? And so they counsel us, when Brian says project, it's like a development project for us, or some of our cleanup projects. So like those cleanup projects that will be done to portions of our code, and in some extent to some of our GIS, Vanderwall will still participate in. Did that answer your question?
It did.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions for Brian? Cool. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks.
Mason, do you guys find value in us stepping through this chart? Mason kind of already, do you feel like you already did kind of step through the chart?
We did, yeah.
Okay. Are there any other just general open session questions? What we want to spend the rest of our time doing is talking to you a little bit more specifically about these projects and what some of the negotiation strategies will need to be and kind of gauge your comfortability with those. So if there's nothing else, I want to just check in with the people online because I need to keep Mr. Moldenhauer around. So Stacy, since you're our team member, I'm sure you're comfortable hopping off once we go to closed?
Yep.
Okay. And then I'm not sure who caller one is, but once we go to closed session, whomever you are you planning to stick around for the end of the meeting? We'll just come back into open and then adjourn.
I'll just hang up and I'll call back in for the regular council meeting.
Okay, I appreciate that very much. Thank you. So then, if there's
Thanks.
If there's no other open session comments, I would look for a motion to go to closed pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, paren 1, paren E, to deliberate or negotiate the purchase of public property, the investing of public funds, or conducting of other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed. This pertains to our bargaining strategy for potential residential developments. Is there such a motion to go to closed? Motion by Mr. Wetzel, second by Mr. Schmidt. Megan, will you take the roll, please?
Wetzel? Moldenhauer?
Aye.
Davis?
Aye.
Lampy? Ford? Bartz? Blanky?
Aye.
Schmidt? Motion passed 8-0.
Awesome, thank you.